Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started for chapter 6 as far as the notes is concerned. There again, this chapter, we're going to go through it pretty quick. So I would say we'll conclude these notes by Friday. A good portion of the notes will be tomorrow on everybody's remote day on Wednesday. We will try to cover maybe just a couple of the slides this class period, and then the students that are actually in class will go ahead and work on the New France presentation, and so we'll go ahead and do that. But we want to go ahead and cover sort of the introduction of chapter 6 as we talk about the duel for North America. Now, first thing we're going to mention here is France. France finds a foothold, of course, in Canada, but France, like England and Holland, France was really a latecomer in the race for the colonies. It was convulsed in the 1500s by foreign wars, of course, and domestic strife. Case in point would be the St. Bartholomew Day Massacre, just one of several incidents that's going to take place. Of course, during this time period in France, it's very similar to what is taking place in England, in which we've already looked at in previous chapters. It kind of seems to be a power struggle, a religious struggle between Catholicism and Protestantism, and France is going to have their own problems with that. And what manifests that, of course, is the St. Bartholomew Day Massacre of 1572. So there is a series of foreign wars and domestic strife, of course, religious problems for the most part. So there again, in 1598, things will turn around. But there again, just to give you some additional information as far as the St. Bartholomew Day Massacre, I'm going to flip the lights on here, and I'm going to bring this over to you to the whiteboard here and make it a little easier here, just to maybe take a couple of notes here on the St. Bartholomew Day Massacre. Just a little bit more in detail as far as the PowerPoint. All right, so the St. Bartholomew Day Massacre is going to take place 8/24/1572. It's, of course, going to be Catholic versus Protestant. The massacre will last all night. I think what motivates sort of the Catholics is the flowering of a dead tree. They took that as a sign of God, or from God, that they need to take back the Catholic ways. And I think over the course of time, 10,000 would be killed.
Luke Wilson, come to the office, please. Luke Wilson.
So that is just a case in point as far as the struggle that's taking place in France from a religious perspective. Now, things is going to change several years later. In 1598, the Edict of Nantes is going to be established. As you saw on the smart board, the results in that was going to be religious tolerance for French Protestants. So a more radical Reformation is going to emerge. And then there again, you're also going to have the development of the French Huguenots, nothing more than French Protestants. So they're going to feel a little bit of that religious oppression alleviated as a result of the Edict of Nantes. And there again, this has a lot of motivation for Samuel de Champlain, who would eventually become the father of New France. So I want to just go ahead and give you that information and sort of the content development, in the late 1500s. Now we're going to move back over here, of course, to the smart board, and we'll proceed as far as the notes on it. There again, we're not going to take that many notes today, so hopefully everybody can see that. All right, and there again, what we put on the whiteboard just goes a little bit in greater detail than what's on the your PowerPoint here as far as your slides here. All right, so 1608, of course, Quebec would be established as the explorations of Champlain. He was an intrepid soldier, he was an explorer, and eventually would be known as the father of New France. He entered into friendly relations with the neighboring Huron Indians when he finds himself in North America, and he would help defeat the Iroquois. So aligned with Huron tribe, we see bulleted point Y, a mistake. Of course, the Iroquois and Huron were notable enemies. So the French doesn't do much for themselves as far as gaining diplomatic relations with the Iroquois by siding with the Huron. So it does create a little bit of animosity there. The Iroquois, however, did hamper French efforts into the Ohio River Valley later on. Unlike English colonists, the French colonists didn't immigrate to North America in hordes. The peasants were too poor, the Huguenots weren't allowed to leave. So it made it very difficult to be able to sort of become developed or more developed at a quicker pace like the English colonies was. So tough situation there. Louis XIV will eventually come into power and be there from 1643 to 1715. A 72-year reign, a glorious period for France. One thing that will take place under Louis XIV is he will revoke the Edict of Nantes. He will do away with that. He takes it upon himself to be more of a Catholic king and make major attempts at restoration as far as Catholicism in France. So his ideas of religious tolerance, he's not necessarily on board with that. So he is going to make progressive steps during his reign to do away with Protestantism in France. So that's one thing that will, of course, lead back to oppression and, of course, the desire, for migration as well. So note that about Louis XIV. All right, New France there again, as you see here. What you see, of course, in yellow on this map is New France, or will eventually become New France by 1750. So that just goes to show what New France and what the French were able to do. That's carving out a pretty big tract of land, of course much bigger than your British colonies by the 1750s. The king takes over as a royal province, fewer rights than settlers in British colonies. There again, you did see a representative assembly, a trial by jury. Very slow growth, all right, for economic reasons. Efforts to seed the population, of course, with the king's daughters, Les Filles du Roi, they would be referred to as. The Caribbean possessions would be favored as well. So even though they may have a larger tract of land, it is safe to say that from a development perspective, it was a little bit more of difficulty for the French. And of course, at the conclusion of the French and Indian War, all of this will become in British possession. So it is safe to say that this is going to be very short-lived. And here's a visual as far as the king's daughters that would be sent to New France. And in your, of course, research, you might go into greater detail as far as the requirements and qualifications and things like that. We'll let you research that on your own. So as New France fans out, okay, let's see if we can all right, so we may just have to, let me try it one more time. I have no idea what's going on there. So anyway, hopefully you can see that. Let me put it just a little bit closer to where you can see that. I don't know why it's doing that for technology. Anyway, New France found out the beaver is going to attract the French fur trapper. New France, when we say New France, we're predominantly talking Canada. One of the most valuable resources, of course, was the beaver. Beaver hunters were known as the coureurs du bois that you see here on the left. That is, of course, runners of the woods. They would litter the land with place names, including Baton Rouge, Terre Haute, Des Moines, and Grand Teton. So there again, and a lot of those names, of course, are present to this day. The French Voyager that you see in the bottom left here also recruited Indians to hunt for beaver as well, but Indians were decimated by the white man's disease and the beaver population would become heavily extinguished. French Catholic missionaries were zealous that, of course, tried to convert a lot of the Indians. One other item of note here would be as far as to thwart English settlement from pushing into the Ohio Valley, Antoine Cadillac founded Detroit in 1701. Louisiana was founded in 1682 by Robert de La Salle to halt Spanish expansion into the area near the Gulf of Mexico. There again, 3 years later, he tried to fulfill his dream by returning, but instead landed in Spanish Texas and was murdered by his mutinous men in 1687. The fertile Illinois country, where the French established forts and trading posts, became the Garden of France's North American Empire. So it just goes to show that they were heavily spread out. Now this is going to be tremendous, or make tremendous problems once the British colonists start to step in and vie, so to speak, for certain land in and around the Ohio Valley. And once they start to do that, then we start to see of course, clash of empires, in which we will talk about tomorrow. So there again, these are just sort of short preliminary notes to sort of give you some basics as far as France, and of course you can go into greater detail in your presentation or your research. And so we'll stop there. Please remember that the majority of Chapter 6 notes will be tomorrow during everybody's remote day. So make sure you take notes for that. Have a good day.